Thank you, Margaret. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Alaine. Her friends know her as Lainey Duncan. She has a unique approach to acupuncture that integrates modern understandings of the neurobiology of traumatic stress with ancient healing principles from acupuncture and Asian medicine. Lainey studied acupuncture at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. She co-founded the Integrative Healing LLC in 2012 with a goal to integrate the wisdom of Asian medicine with a study of neurobiology and traumatic stress in both the classroom and the treatment room. Her research background includes studies assessing the impact of integrative medicine on compassion fatigue in military caregivers, acupuncture for treatment of combat-related traumatic stress, chronic headaches in veterans with traumatic brain injuries, pain in veterans of all conflicts, and Gulf War veterans' illness. Alaine was a founding member of the Integrative Health and Wellness Program of the DC Veterans Administration Medical Center, where she served as a clinician and researcher from 2007 to 2017. She also co-founded the National Capital Area chapter of Acupuncturists Without Borders, who until COVID-19 provided free weekly acupuncture treatments to immigrants, refugees, and neighbors in need in our metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. Her book, The Tao Trauma, The Practitioner's Guide for Integrating 5-Element Theory and Trauma Treatments, is a foundation for classes and workshops she offers for acupuncturists and mental health providers. It's available in print, audio, and Kindle wherever you buy books online. But I wanted to, as a longtime friend of Lainey, who introduced her from a personal basis to connect us to the project of the Peace Education SIG. Lainey is, and the close relationship between peace, anti-racism, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialist work, which these kinds of connections are so important when we understand trauma within a socio-political international context. I first met Lainey when I was working on the case, the Greensboro, North Carolina case. I had moved into the Washington, D.C. area with one of the widows of the November 3rd, 1979 Greensboro massacre in North Carolina. And at that time, Lainey was a Quaker and active in the peace and justice movement and was supportive to us as we set up the Greensboro Justice Fund in the Washington, D.C. area. It is through the years she has taken on work, and I'm so glad that there's so many of you here in the room with us that are acupuncturists and who see this work. The Greensboro massacre actually involved medical doctors who had gone into the practice of labor organizing, looking at the systemic reasons behind that trauma. And as we heal, that relationship between spirituality, between our inner selves, and between our work is part of that integrative perspective. And we're very glad that all of you are here, particularly in these times, to be able to lean in, to pursue that work of justice and at this time. So I'm going to present Lainey. There might have been some of you who are new to our workshop today and missed our first workshop, so she will be reviewing those points. And then we will be presenting the questions from those who participated and took the time to think about what kinds of questions they knew we would want to address. When we think at the time that we scheduled this, we knew that we would be reeling from the election. And the first workshop, just in a slice in time, was we were gearing it for teachers and nurse practitioners who were preparing for the school year. And now, again, we're at this time. So thank you so much, Lainey, for being with us.
My pleasure, my total pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I've prepared some. Jan, can you enable attendee screen sharing?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. I am going to just warn you a little bit in advance. I did take a little bit of liberty.
I'm making you the host right now, so that way you
okay.
can go ahead and do what you need to
Great.
do. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Yep. I am going to, as both Margaret and Shelley indicated, review material from last time, but I'm also going to focus a little bit of my, some of my comments more on how do we build resilience and what role can teachers play in building resilience in communities, and look at a community context for trauma healing. I mean, there's always the internal context of the individual experience that needs attention, but there's also the context in which people learn and grow and develop, and that it seems that someone can have a vulnerability to a trauma response, but that can be turned on or turned off based on life experience. So, and the role, teachers can play a really critical role. So I want to really focus on that kind of information. So we'll see where we go. So I'm really delighted to be here, and here we go. So I want to begin with a little exercise. I'd like to invite you to just set your pens and paper down and look for a comfortable experience. Maybe find your body in the chair. Let your body be heavy. Look for support, comfort. Maybe just look for 2 or 3% more comfort. This is an exercise that you could actually start your school day with, those of you who are teachers. Find yourself comfortable. There you go. And just notice if your breath gets a little deeper or your body feels a little more sunk in the chair, or maybe there's a slight shift in your heart rate. Just welcome those sensations. And then I'm going to invite you to bring something mildly disturbing or disappointing. Something like there wasn't cream for my coffee this morning. Or the hot water ran out in my shower. Something mildly disappointing, disturbing. And just notice what happens to that experience in the chair when you're with this memory. And now I'd like to invite you to simply rock your body. Could be back and forth, could be side to side. Just rock, just rock. So I just noticed I wanted to take a deep breath. It just came to me. And you might even want to hum a soothing tune, or just hum. As you explore different positions for your rocking and this experience of humming. And I want to invite you to notice movement or stillness, images or sensations that come to you, or maybe some meaning. And I'm going to stop my share, and we're going to, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and give you about 10 minutes. Yeah, 4 or 5 persons per room in about 10 minutes, just to share what that experience was. And I'm interested in you sharing the movement of your sensations, how they shifted, and your experience of that. And I'll call you back in about 9-10 minutes. Here you go. So are we in a breakout room together? Are we in a breakout room together? I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I was in a room when I slipped out. Welcome back. You're coming back in. Glad to have you back. That exercise came from a book called My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Our Bodies. It's full of exercises that guide people into their tissues and into their body's experience of life in this moment, and imprint of past moments on either contracted, braced, or flaccid, lacking tone, either hypertone or hypotone, and helping people find their way to their bodies as a source of healing. So it's a very insightful book. I highly recommend it. I put the title in the chat so that you can find it. Anybody have something that feels critical to share about that experience? or we can go forward with the material. Go ahead and
Alaine, I was, it's not unfamiliar work to me, and I was so delighted to remember how quickly things can change, like within a moment, and it didn't take a lot of effort, and it didn't take a lot of
Right.
thinking, and I didn't have to like,
Right.
I better get my mind on this. It just, I shifted my body to something that was really familiar and comforting, and in a
Right.
way, it took me back to infancy and that sense of
We
that
talked
sense of
about that
comfort
too.
and safety and
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
Rasmus says he starts every meeting by asking everyone to hum together.
Mhm.
And when we hum, we're stimulating the ventral vagus nerve, which we're going to talk a lot about today, that travels, through the throat and governs the mouth and the muscles of the face and the eyes and the twinkle. So that hum, just to ask your students to hum for 30 seconds as you start your day, can make a difference in stimulating ventral vagus nerve, which is going to allow for greater access to frontal cortex, easier to learn when you have your frontal cortex online, and also into greater capacity for relationship, which in this time of teaching online and social distancing, it's really critical to cultivate the ventral vagus by figuring out really creative ways to engage in relationship. So, yeah.
I just want to dovetail on what Stacy said. One of the people in our group talked about how the exercise helped her to regulate. She felt that she felt better regulated. And then we started to brainstorm and link it to the classroom about, well, first we went to infancy, like Stacy alluded to, that, that movement of rocking and humming. This is very reminiscent to being an infant or a toddler, a young child.
That's right.
And, that person who loved you helps regulate you by holding you and rocking you. And that, we need to do that in our classrooms too, even if it's not physically, but help the child to, go back to that, to connect back to that. Unfortunately, some of our kids may not have gotten too much of that. So that there you run into,
Exactly.
That's part of the reason why they're having such a hard time regulating themselves.
That's right.
But
That's
so,
right.
so
Great expansion there. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and we're going to start with a little bit of background about the nature of traumatic stress, and then we're going to get into this exploration of resiliency. Come on. Huh. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So here's a description of life. So we've got this these two horizontal lines that are like our zone of comfort, our zone of resiliency. And within that zone is this waving line that's an expression of what Asian medicine would call yang and yin, what neurobiology calls sympathetic activation and parasympathetic restoration. So life exists within this zone in this wave. Okay. So when we experience a threat, say, for example, we're driving down the road, we're in our car, we have active social engagement response because we know that we're driving a 3,000-pound ton of steel, and that we're going to obey the traffic laws and the regulations. We're in relationship with the person at the four-way stop, and we take our proper turn. So this is a social engagement response of a regulated person. We're inside our zone. But all of a sudden, we see that in our rearview mirror that there's someone who's driving erratically and too fast. So we get a little bit of sympathetic arousal going. We're focused. We might sit up straight, where our eyes have more acuity. We're listening more deeply. We have all of our sensory faculties available to us because we're watching for this threat. And so we choose to pull over and allow this erratic driver to go by to help us be safe. And then we come back, we take a breath. We're okay. That car's gone on ahead. In fact, we even see, maybe we see an officer traveling after him and going to pull him over. So we're all okay. This is a successful negotiation of danger. We come back to our zone of resiliency. Now let's do that again. We're driving along in our social engagement response. We see this car driving erratically. And this time we're unable to get to the side of the road and stop and let them go by. And in fact, they rear end us at the next light. And we're in tremendous alarm at this point. We're worried about we're in pain, we're shocked, we're in trouble, right? So at a certain point, we are unable to just simply be in arousal because our heart is beating really fast. And our heart can only beat fast like that for so long before we go unconscious. We lose our consciousness, we freeze, we collapse. Now, as it happens, we're in our own neighborhood and someone we know sees that we've been in this accident and they come over and they speak slowly and thoughtfully and in a relational tone. Hey, I'm here. I saw what happened. Listen, I've called the ER. I've called the rescue squad. And this person holds your hand, touches your shoulder, speaks in soothing terms, gets appropriate help. And when the rescue people come, they also are competent, relational, kind, and thoughtful. And so we're able then, with their kindness and their relationship, to come back to this zone of comfort, this zone of resiliency. We're taken to the hospital, and because we're in that zone, our body is regulated and we're able to heal. Whatever broken bones or strained muscles or whatever, we're able to heal because we're in that zone. Okay. We are like this bunny in the woods. The predator-prey relationships that we understand from nature can inform how humans also respond to threat. This rabbit does not get insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, anxiety, depression, or any of the other kinds of symptoms of traumatic stress, in spite of being chased by foxes and wolves and eagles 24/7 of its life. And although the rabbit looks just a little bit frozen afraid right now, in a few moments, it's going to notice, I don't hear a fox, I don't smell a fox, I don't see a fox, I must be safe. And that conclusion allows the rabbit to come back to regulation. So we have that same wiring. We have that same capacity to come back to regulation. And most of the time, all of the research, both from biologists and from epidemiologists, say that most of us will return to regulation. We might be profoundly affected by that time we had that car accident, but it won't affect our physiology or our mental health or stability in our relationships and so forth for most people. Let's take a look now at complex trauma, the kind of trauma that stays with us and affects learners. So a couple things to notice here. First off, this wave doesn't change. So this wave is available to us for healing all the time. It can't be broken. It's based on things like the rising and setting of the sun, the movement from summer to winter. All the laws of nature are inherent in this wave. But you'll notice that the zone of resiliency is a little bit more narrow. So that could be because of COVID. You know, like there's a certain level of stress that you may notice that the time of day when you're supposed to be resting and digesting, you're supposed to be asleep, maybe you're a little more wakeful in the night. Or when you run up a flight of stairs and you notice that your heart is beating a little fast and your breath is a little short, you may be taken to that panic attack that you had once long ago and be driven into thinking that there's something terribly wrong. I think we're all just a little bit more brittle because our zone is narrow. So then when the trauma happens. So in this example, let's have you're driving in the dark, and you go too fast around a curve, and you end up going through the barrier and tumbling down the hill. And no one sees you. It's late at night. No one sees you. No one sees you go down there, and you are thrust into a very high state of sympathetic arousal. You're panicked. You're in pain. Your heart is racing. Your breath is fast. You're clamoring to try and figure out how to get out of the car. You've been injured. You can't get out, and you stay there long enough that you can't mitigate your high heart rate. You can't mitigate that signal. I'm in danger. I'm in life threat. I'm aroused. I'm activated. You can't mitigate it. And so in order to save your life, your body takes you into this collapse. And because no one saw you and no one's there to come get you, you stay there all night long until daylight comes. You're cold, you're in pain, and you've gone unconscious. And this time when the person sees you and sees the embankment broken and comes to get you, they're not so calm. And their voice isn't so familiar to you. And they kind of shout and scream. And they make you more anxious. They tell you how badly you're hurt instead of how quickly they're going to get help for you. And when they do get help for you, they do it in an agitated way. And so instead of returning to this narrow zone of comfort that you have, you end up with this. You end up with that immediate history of that high tone, sympathetic chaos and anxiety, along with this deep collapse, frozen state at the same time. It's like foot on the gas, foot on the brake. And this disturbs your body's regulation, and you can become habituated, depending on how deeply that gets imprinted, with that state of regulation. Your healing from your accident will be compromised, and maybe your ability to trust people might be compromised as well, because you didn't get the kind of help that you felt like you needed. And then when the next danger happens, you're more vulnerable to dysregulation. So the more traumas that particularly a child, well, all of us were children once, traumas that we experience in childhood do not make us more resilient. They tend to make us more vulnerable because our system has gone into dysregulation, and we have a hard time coping in adult life. So that's kind of the background. So a little bit more about Western biology. We have three platforms, three neurologic states that inform how we negotiate threat. The first one is that social engagement response. It's governed by that ventral vagus nerve that we stimulated with our humming earlier on. It's our capacity to be in relationship. To obey traffic laws is kind of the most minimal, but it's also our ability to be in connection with other human beings and to feel comfortable and safe. The second thing that we'll try is our mobilization response. That's our sympathetic nervous system, essentially our fight or flight response. It's what puts us into motion to protect and defend ourselves and others, protect and defend those who we experience as vulnerable. We will feel biologically called to support those people. If those things don't work, we will go into that collapse or freeze response, which is governed by the dorsal vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve ensures our parasympathetic nervous system, and it has this first aspect that keeps us in relationship, and then this more primitive aspect that creates the shutdown freeze response. We tend to use these in this order, although we will flow back and forth in them to allow a range of behaviors to navigate life. So the ventral vagus is really the name of the game. The more that we can cultivate this capacity to experience safety and relationship, the more regulated our body is going to be, the more access we'll have to our frontal cortex, the more ability to have complex and nuanced thought and to learn. So the ventral vagus is exclusive to mammals. It allows for safety and immobilization to exist without engaging stress physiology. So when you look at these boys, their parents, both of them, are kind of holding them snug. If any one of us was holding them snug in the same way, they would be freaking out because they don't have relationship with us. So they are having an embodied experience of, I feel immobilized, but I feel safe. I'm okay. And you can see it by the shine in their face, the twinkle in their eyes, the smile on their face. These are all ways that the ventral vagus shows up. Children who don't have that kind of experience may have a hard time in first grade when they have to sit in a desk that confines them. That whole experience may need to be negotiated and slowed down, where they get allowed to approximate sitting in the desk and move in and move out and maybe decorate their desk and, you know, things to make relationship with the desk in order to feel comfortable being immobile, semi-immobilized and yet safe. So these boys will be okay going to the dentist later in life, where the dentist is leaning over them and in their mouth, because they've had this experience in their tissues. They'll be okay. They'll be better off going into a surgery where they have to be immobilized in order for the procedure, or to have a massage or something like that, to have someone towering over them. Even to be a student with an adult who's 2 feet taller towering over may be threatening to someone who hasn't had the kind of foundation that these boys have. So the capacity to interpret facial expressions accurately and tone of voice accurately is rooted in the cultivation of the ventral vagus nerve. The sympathetic system, we can be grateful for the sympathetic system. We can be grateful for all these systems because they help us in different times. We're always on. The sympathetic system is always on, even when we're asleep at night. It doesn't take much when we wake up for us to go into alertness. I hear something outside, I need to check. So it's the platform that allows us to have fight or flight response, to engage in protecting ourselves or others. It works to innervate the skeletal muscles, the joints and the limbs, but it requires a parasympathetic break for non-aggressive or pro-social behaviors to emerge. This system can get, because it innervates muscles and joints, if we don't get a chance to complete that defensive response, it can get stored in muscles and joints and limbs, so that our desire to complete that punch remains with us because we didn't get a chance to complete the punch. So this is where someone who gets bullied as a small child and is unable to complete a punch with the person who's bullying, or to defend themselves in whatever socially appropriate way might be, that they will retain that desire to protect and defend themselves and to assert their power into adulthood. And the risk is, if they don't have a fully cultivated ventral vagal system, they may become impulsive with their anger and get engaged in violence that is not commensurate with the level of threat. So this is the person who gets involved in a school shooting. You read their biographies, they always say they were quiet, they were kind of a loner, they kept to themselves, you know, stuff like that. They didn't have a healthy ventral vagus nerve, and their sympathetic system was thwarted too many times in childhood, and now they're going to take it out on somebody else, and I'm going to feel powerful for once in my life. Then the dorsal vagus, it has two aspects. It has low tone, which we want. Low tone, it doesn't have any brake on sympathetic arousal. It will coexist with the ventral vagus, but it allows us to digest our food. It allows hormones and neurotransmitters to move. It's our belly brain. It allows us to have an awareness of this person feels safe. I knew it in my guts, they were safe. That's accurate. Or I knew in my guts I shouldn't trust him. I need to keep my distance. That's accurate. And it invisibly turns last night's gristle into this morning's poop. So it also digests our traumatic experiences. It allows us to break them down into discrete pieces and let them go. Let them go with our bowel. And the one important thing about the low tone dorsal vagus is that 80% of the nerves in our gut that belong to the dorsal vagus nerve are afferent. In other words, they come up to our brain. So our belly does a better job of convincing our brain of a certain truth than our brain does at convincing our belly. Like you try to override your guts about someone who's safe or unsafe, and it's pretty hard to do. And when you do override it, you're usually wrong. If you're regulated, you're probably wrong. If you're dysregulated, you might make wrong choice. Your guts may make a wrong choice for you. But then we have high tone dorsal vagus. This is the aspect of the dorsal vagus that allowed you to freeze when you fell off that embankment in your car. And it's protective in that it helps to preserve your chi, preserve your energy, so that when someone does come to help you out, you have enough energy to respond to them. You also will feel less pain. And if you're where prey animals are coming to get you, you'll appear dead, and they won't be so very interested in you. But the problem is that this freeze that profoundly impacts the gut and to some extent the heart has a really big impact on our health, a really, really big impact on our health and on our functioning, how we function in culture and society. So the name of the game is cultivate ventral vagus in order to help thaw frozen dorsal vagus. Because if we get, when we're involved in high tone sympathetic response with all of our energy in our muscles and joints, we will necessarily inhibit the function of the dorsal vagus. So our ability to transform food becomes compromised, our ability to transform life experiences, to learn lessons from our trauma. I mean, trauma is like if we put our hand on a hot stove, we learn not to touch the hot stove. If we start crossing the street when a car is coming and our mother yells and comes and scoops us up and carries us off the street, we've learned something from that experience. It's designed for us to learn from. But if our dorsal vagus is shut down with high tone, we won't be able to digest that experience. And we certainly will not be able to digest that experience in a way that's life expanding. It will be life contracting. And we'll be able to interpret information from our guts with more accuracy. We can't learn from stressful experiences when our organs of digestion are dysregulated. So here's the problem. Infants and young children don't have the capacity to make use of their ventral vagus nerve. They're born with the structures in place, but they need to have chi or energy brought to them in order for them to be to be able to function well. So if their heart goes into high arousal because they feel frightened or threatened, they don't have that capacity for the ventral vagus to soothe and calm them and say they're there. They need an external ventral vagus, which is why the parents walk the floor, rock the baby, coo, all the things that we talked about there at the beginning to help soothe when an infant doesn't have capacity to self-soothe. So all they can do is this big shutdown. And the more they use this hard reset, the more likely they will have disrupted neurodevelopment. The more likely they'll have compromised education success and higher rates of both morbidity and mortality in adulthood. So this is really what we're talking about. So if we can bring diplomatic solutions to conflicts, like our neighbor doesn't take their trash cans in promptly enough for our taste, you know, if we can have a way to talk with our neighbor about our obsession with trash cans without being in conflict, we will have been made good use of our ventral vagus nerve. But if we want to go key their car or you know, trash their trash or run over their trash cans that are out on the street, or, you know, do something kind of aggressive, then we're not using our ventral vagus, and instead we're in unbridled sympathetic arousal. It's not helpful. So the important thing here is that the ventral vagus nerve that comes from the front of the brainstem and down and innervates everything above the diaphragm has a profound influence on cardiac function, which we know as Asian medicine providers that the heart and the mind are the same energy. And the heart math people will confirm that. So our capacity for memory, cognition up here in our neocortex is rooted in the balance, regulation, and coherence in our heart. It also gives us a capacity to make successful eye contact, recognize facial expression, understand vocal tone, and is the foundation for all the attachment theory and all of our capacity for compassion. Also our capacity for creativity, empathy, and capacity for complex thought. So ventral vagus is really important in the classroom. So the reason why we mammals need a ventral vagus is because, and particularly human primates, our ventral vagus, our frontal cortex is so large that it's not like a turtle that can tolerate going under the mud for months at a time. We need constant oxygenization in order for our complex frontal cortex to have the nourishment that it needs in terms of blood and energy. So we can't afford to use our freeze response to mitigate low-level conflict. We should only be using that freeze response when we desperately need it because our life is threatened. We shouldn't be using it for low-level threat. If we become habituated to using it for low-level threat in infancy, it will make for problems for us as adulthood. We're only born with enough ventral vagal capacity to suckle, to find the breast and nurse. After that, it's our parents' engagement, our caregiver engagement in playful and loving touch and engagement that helps to develop it. First 6 months of life are critical, then a year, then 5 years, then 12 years, then through early 20s. But the important thing to note is that we can, through appropriate interventions, we can still cultivate ventral vagal capacity and developmental phases that were lost due to compromised ventral vagal capacity well into adulthood. And that's what us healers are doing or supporting all along. So it's what allows us to use relationship and diplomacy. And when we think, like I like to think of, especially this year, of our nation as a trauma survivor. It's been for me a very helpful way to analyze what's going on in our nation. So I think of our communal ventral vagus, our national ventral vagus, as our ability to be in connection with our neighbors. And the more capacity for connection we have with our neighbors, the less domestic violence and the greater capacity to build relationships across differences. Greater capacity to recognize this is a human being over here. Might be a different race, might be a different cultural background, might speak a different language, but this is a human being and our feet touch the same earth. So with we need to cultivate structures and systems that support capacity to experience safety and relationship, in particular for children, but for all of us, in order to build our communal ventral vagus. So I think that the experience of kind of chaos and dysregulation that we saw from our previous White House made for a level of anxiety and arousal that was not helpful to communities and a sense of safety and relationship. And I noted that, I think that the speeches by President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, you heard the tone of their voice. You saw the smiles on their face. You could experience a sense of engagement and care. And those kinds of things are very soothing to our national ventral vagus. And I hope that they'll be able to create an environment where all of us are just a little bit more able to listen to each other, to respond to each other, to help heal the dysregulation that's underneath a lot of the chaos, I think, that we're experiencing on our national streets. So let's talk a little bit about epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science that says that experiences in life can affect the expression of genes. So what we found is that traumatic stress can change genetic expression, and they can change it in two ways. One that enhances resilience and one that increases morbidity and mortality. And which way that goes has so much to do with the environment and the experiences that are created for that person whose maybe parents or grandparents had profound traumatic stress experiences. If we can create communities where people feel safe and in safe relationship, they're going to be less likely to go towards that increased morbidity, mortality, and dysregulation as a result of their epigenetics, and more likely to go into enhanced resilience as a result. So this whole issue of epigenetics, I find particularly profound information potentially on the higher rates of mortality and morbidity in brown, Black, and indigenous people in the COVID pandemic, because of the impact on production of T cells and immune function in the guts, when the guts have been shut down maybe for generations because of the repressed urge to protect and defend ourselves and people we seem who appear to be vulnerable. Like that suppression wants to come out. And we saw a lot of it come out this summer, very helpful for expanding the capacity of our national body to make important changes, like taking statues down and putting a magnolia instead of the stars and bars on the Mississippi flag, and lots of reading and studying and exploring and soul searching that's helping to expand the lived life of the American people. So I'll just share a couple research studies that I found kind of fascinating. In this one, male mice were subjected to foot shocks, and they injected the smell of cherry blossoms into their cage. So they developed this association of a stress response with the smell of cherry blossoms. Then they could take the electric shock out and just put in cherry blossoms, and they would go into arousal. They brought some female mice in, allowed mating, and then took the males out so that the male mice had no contact with their pups, but their pups exhibited sympathetic arousal and changes in their biochemistry with the smell of cherry blossom smoke, even though they had never experienced shocks in their feet. Similarly, their grandpups also exhibited the same arousal. So we could interpret this in two ways, and probably the experience of epigenetics and threat shows up in these same two ways too. And on the one hand, dad and granddad are alerting their pups and grandpups, this is something to watch out for, Junior. I want you to know about it. So it's a way of protecting them. It's also a way it can show up in a classroom where there's a child with very disruptive behavior that is related to thwarted sympathetic arousal that wasn't allowed expression in their parent or grandparent. And it becomes, it develops an appearance of personality. That kid's always angry. That kid's always a bully. That kid's a problem. That kid's this, that, or the other thing. But maybe we need to have a bigger picture that allows a little more scope and a little greater access to contact with that child that can help transform that experience of thwarted response. So important to look broadly at these kinds of issues. Do a little bit about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is a research study that's being held now at the Centers for Disease Control. If you're interested in the impact of early trauma on people, I highly recommend going to cdc.gov and exploring the Adverse Childhood Experiences research study. On the left here are the questions that are asked of survivors. Each survivor gets 1 point for any one of those things that might have been true in their household. And then the research indicates that the more of those points, the worse your outcomes are. So in this chart, this pyramid, that's the ACE study pyramid, at the bottom we have certain adverse childhood experiences like those ones on the left, affecting social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, causing development of adoption of high-risk behaviors, causing increase in disability, disease, and social problems, and then early death. People who have multiple ones of these experiences who don't get help have a up to 20-year shorter life expectancy. So the higher your ACE scores, the higher your adult risk behaviors, things like smoking and addictions, obesity. I want to talk a little bit about obesity because when that dorsal vagus goes into high tone and is shut down by that high tone in the sympathetic system, the capacity to turn food into energy gets compromised. Our whole peristalsis and that capacity for transformation gets compromised. So the symptom of weight gain around the middle is a common one in trauma survivors. Also, challenges with metabolizing certain nutrients, recognizing hunger and fullness is compromised. There's also higher rates of depression, cancer, heart, lung, liver disease, osteoporosis, lots of things. So causing shortened lifespan. Now, here's for teachers. Students with 4 of those experiences, 4 of those lifetime experiences, 32 times more likely to have learning or behavior problems in school. So the kids that are troubled and are giving you grief, they have had a tough row to hoe behind them. They're also going to have increasing alcoholism, cancer, emphysema, and so forth as adults. And if they had 6 of those experiences, there's a 30-fold increase in attempted suicide. And of course, those suicidal ideation is going to come when the zone of resiliency is more narrow and the sense of threat is higher. So a capacity to manage that sense of threat is compromised, and the thought pattern to go to suicide will be more common. So I want to talk a little bit about resiliency. This book, Nurturing Resilience, is a real go-to opportunity for not just for mental health providers, but for parents and teachers as well. You may notice that Kathy Kane is one of the authors. She's also co-author for my book. I've studied with both Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell. They're fabulous clinicians and teachers. So we can look at resiliency as the ability to achieve positive outcomes despite adversity. So this is a lot of what the spirituality and education SIG is talking about. The things that are most protective for supporting resiliency in children, the first one is supportive adult-child relationships. Doesn't have to be the parent. In fact, a coach, a teacher, a pastor, a neighbor, it can be anyone. And they only need one person to show an interest in them to transform the risks associated with trauma. how a teacher, I'm not a teacher, I'm going to be humble here, but how a teacher can implement opportunities for children to experience self-efficacy and perceived control. I'm sure you can be creative about how you can implement that into your classroom. How you can help them learn adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacities. So that's the ability, when I feel angry, I can take a breath or I can hum. If you teach kids to hum when they feel angry, you're cultivating their ventral vagus. Or can you look at me? You know, can we find relationship? Maybe that's a way that you can help them cultivate capacity for self-regulation. And also these sources of faith, hope, and cultural tradition. You know, things like rituals around puberty, rituals around adulthood, rituals around graduations, faith, church youth groups, ways to instill hope and a sense of possibility can be really protective for kids, that they feel broken inside themselves. And if you don't affirm that, it can make a really big difference.
I'm sorry, Elaine.
Yes.
I just wanted to give you a time check because it's now coming up on 1:15 and you've got your Q&A component to engage in. So if
Okay. Can I have 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Okay. So teachers make a difference. One committed relationship with a supportive adult. You could be that person. Positive interactions and affirmations. Critical experience in the developing child. And I really want to encourage you to engage in your own self-care, because when we're regulated, the heart math people will teach us this. When we're regulated, we can help regulate some people in our environment with great readiness. This is a resilience questionnaire. I highlighted the issues that teachers could play a particular role in. When I was little, other people helped my mom and dad take care of me. They seemed to love me. When I was a child, teachers, coaches, youth leaders, or ministers were there to help me. When I felt really bad, I could always find someone I trusted to talk to. As a youth, people noticed that I was capable and could get things done. So these are the kind of background culture of classrooms that can help children who have trauma backgrounds to. This one, I think I taught this one last time. So these mice were cultivated traumatic stress in moms, and their pups up to 7 generations continued to show high cortisol levels and aberrant behavior. But one generation at Mouse Canyon Ranch, with running wheels and big cages and carpeting and toys that stimulated brain function, resulted in a generation of pups without abnormal behavior or biology. So mice are different than humans, but it does give us some hope that we can make a difference for kids and then make a difference for future generations. So don't take lightly the work that you're doing. It's critically important. Another piece of research, stressed male mice who were exposed to an enriched environment and their offspring performed similarly to the controls in response to stressful challenges in adulthood. So enrichment activities in your classroom and in your school can make a difference, not just for current children in the school, but also for their children. So we can look at capacity for enhanced coping as a result of these kinds of interventions. And things that enhance ventral vagus function, things like showing your smile, showing sparkle in your eye, letting people know in an energetic way that you're here, you see them, you understand, you're smiling, using experiences of co-regulation that you create, like playing patty cake, to help enhance autoregulation. Autoregulation is like our heartbeat or the rhythm of our digestion and so forth. So things like team sports, dancing with others, group singing or games, community theater, small group activities at school. I understand that there are challenges with regard to the pandemic, but the more creative we can be about helping to facilitate relationship and engagement with others, the better our students' outcome is going to be. Remember we talked about the tone of voice and the two rescue people? Like, use the prosody in your voice to help engage listening. Much more interesting, much more relational than turn to page 3 in your spelling book, right? So lower pitch, slower rate, more melodic, and less intensity. And you're gonna access ventral vagus and kind of tickle it into greater function. This is where my activist part gets in here. We can't disentangle the impact of historical trauma from ongoing experiences of physical threat, poor housing, healthcare, and white body supremacy. So teachers need to be activists. Healers need to be activists too, and support the creation of experiences where people feel safe and in relationship. And we need to know that intergenerational transmission of trauma is not synonymous with permanent damage. We can make a difference. It simply implies an experience. So we can change, and by changing our culture, we can change the experience of people who live in our culture. Rituals that may belong in your religious community or in things like graduation ceremonies. We can help transmit learning and meaning. Telling our people's story can help us develop adaptive responses to stress and understanding where we come from and who we are. Transmission of cultural memory creates a sense of identity. It can educate generations about threat and celebrate perseverance as part of every culture's cultural story. And the interesting thing that I think is that these kinds of memories that enhance a sense of identity and perseverance may actually even be stored at the molecular level and affirm community expression and confront that self-identity that so many trauma survivors have of being damaged goods. So here's my synopsis. Restoring balance in any member of a system, family, classroom, workplace, impacts the whole system. Regulation creates regulation. Creating heart-to-heart connection is world healing, and it spreads like honey on warm toast. So if you're interested in more, please reach out for my book, The Tao of Trauma. Listen to Dr. Nadine Brooke Harris. She did a wonderful TED Talk about adverse childhood experiences. You'll find it on their website. Review the ACE study research. And if you'd like, you can register to receive my monthly newsletter, which includes tips on treating trauma on my website, which is listed right there. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you for your patience with me, and I look forward to having some discussion with some of your.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alaine.
Yep.
That was very, very enlightening, wonderful talk, and we truly appreciate you. So at this time, we want to move into the Q&A component, and we have a few invited guests that we would like to share questions that they have with us, and of course, looking for your response in terms of how to kind of handle things. So today we have Dr. Frances Ulrich, who has served as an elementary school teacher for over 20 years on Long Island in New York. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership and several certifications in regular and special education. So please, Dr. Ulrich, please go ahead with your question.
Oh, I love that you mentioned about the desk, the area of the desk, because we're finding that it looks very institutional, whereas the classroom was warm and friendly. There's no carpet now. We can't interact. Do you have any suggestions to make it a little better? We decided, even though they're already in 4th grade, we would decorate the desk to look like a Jeep because we've seen it on Pinterest. Because the classroom looks very severe now, and we're all wearing masks. So sometimes I take my mask down for a second to smile because it looks very serious, and we're constantly washing our hands, very clinical. But there is a silver lining. The children are happy to be back. They've told me that, the whole group, even though it does look like very serious looking, not as friendly anymore.
Yeah. So my first question, the students are in person.
Yes, and 2 are online and 20 are in the classroom now. We just started a week ago.
Okay,
with this.
congratulations. Yeah. I mean, one thing is to really know that your smile, even though it's hidden by your mask, like you can tell that I'm smiling, right?
I try that too,
You know,
but sometimes they're still looking at me because they don't know you as well, you know.
sure, sure, sure. Um, are you able to do any outside activities like playing games, interactive games?
Well,
Or
I just now we wear the mask, but we'll go out in the. I have a big hallway, and we stay 6 feet apart, and we try to do. I had mentioned in the breakout room, we do try things. They're allowed to go outside at recess, but it's only the one class, and they have to keep 12 feet apart, and they keep
12 feet.
complete. Yeah, they're very worried. They even wear the mask outside. It because they're concerned about, having to shut down again. So I do try to do activities with them wearing the mask, but I keep them apart because I'm worried, I'm worried that they'll catch
Sure.
something.
Sure. How about group singing
With the mask, we did.
with the mask on?
We did try singing, especially for birthday. You said the ritual. We make a big deal with the birthday. We sing. We have somebody shake pom poms, and then we show little Minions video. We make a big deal of their birthday.
Yeah,
Much
good.
as we can.
Good, good. And I think I think the singing, especially if they're like rounds, where there's a real sense of relationship with this group and that group and that group.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That might help stimulate a little ventral vagal function and just kind of really accentuating your tone of voice, and
Yes.
really all of that. And small group work.
We do that.
have
We
to
go
be a-
out and we have small group, and then I try different accents because it gets their attention. They think it's funny, different, English accent or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah. I think in injecting play into the learning,
Yes.
and I like what you're doing with the ritual. Yeah, there's a suggestion in the chat: imaginary ball toss. That's a great idea.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Because you're connecting back and forth. Or
That's
even
a good idea.
or a play, where someone has lines and someone else has to respond to the lines.
Oh, we're doing that next week. Because we're doing Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Great.
Because there's a girl with big head of blonde hair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But anything, or I wonder if like step dance, a step troupe, or line dance, they could be 6 feet apart, but they're still engaging in a common physical activity.
That's a good idea too.
Would that help?
It would. Anything with movement, I think you're right. I have to remember that.
Yeah.
It's just also new,
Especially movement that's in relationship. It's not just staying at home and lifting weights. It's it's being in relationship. That co-regulation helping to create auto-regulation.
Yes.
It takes a lot of conscious attention to do that. I mean,
it does.
My heart goes out to all of you.
But one thing about the resilience, we try to read them books about people that were resilient, so that they say, "Oh, see, that person was resilient. I can do this."
Right.
And we also try to have an anti-bullying programs because we're concerned that children have a lot of anger pent up, and if there's a problem, the social worker does visit them. They have a little session with the social worker.
Of course they do. And that kid who's acting like a bully may
Yes.
feel very alone, feel very,
Yes.
It's not that they're actually so full of self-confidence. Really, the opposite is probably true.
No, you're right. The girl in the class that's considered, quote, a bully told somebody recently that she's lonely. So that validates what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So the action to send that bully out into the hallway as a punishment.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah. Underneath they feel lonely, and now you've made them the pariah.
No,
you don't belong. Yeah.
If it makes you feel better, we don't do that.
Thank you. I feel so much better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you, Dr. Ulrich. Our next question comes from our own Yan Hung with a similar question. Yan is a PhD student at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. She grew up in China and came to the US as an international student in 2009. She has been teaching Chinese to both high school and college students since 2010. So please, Yan.
Hi, Ms. Duncan. Thank
Hello,
you
Jan.
so much for the speech. I really like how you relate to this topic to our current situation regarding COVID and online teaching. I do feel to understand the developmental, emotional, and the social challenges that our students who are impacted by trauma take time for teachers to get to know them. So right now with the virtual teaching environments, I found it's even harder to support them in my classrooms,
Yeah.
especially when they have options to turn off their cameras. And also feeling like the strategies you recommended for elementary school students. In high school, I feeling like my students are not as active as younger kids when they do the kinesthetic activities or sing. So I was wondering if you have other suggestions for high school teachers that we could use to help students feel calmer in class, to support them better deal with frustration and stay on task.
Right. Wow. Do you use the breakout rooms in Zoom? Do you get your students into small groups?
Yeah, I do. The situation I found is when we put them into the breakout room, I have to take time, walk around each room to make sure they are staying on task.
Right.
And I often found some students, they turn off their camera and the mic, and only actually part of them are engaging in doing the activities.
Right. Anybody else have some suggestions for Jan? It seems like there's got to be some way to make some games, like to make some learning that's a game. And I don't know if it's important to choose which students go together in the group so that you have a group that's you know, that are friends with each other, and somehow make it fun to practice Chinese in my group.
I think that's a good idea, allowing them to pair up with their friends, because even the college students, we've had to think about how to, you know, have them more engaged. And so what we did, we said, okay, well, in nursing, you do have to interact with clients, you have to interact with patients. So we need that interaction to continue. And so to allow them more flexibility, we say, okay, well, choose your partner. So that way it's a little bit easier for them to do the online interaction with each other, and, you know, even offline when they're working together. So that helps. That has helped.
As long as everybody gets a partner, you know, like if someone who doesn't get chosen, then it's.
And if someone doesn't get chosen, then what we do is we actually say, okay, let's invite this person into the group, because, you know, this person needs to be in a group. Would you be willing to have this person? And you don't force it on them, but you say, you know, you know, she needs a group or he needs a group. And then they will say, okay, she can come or whatever. So that's how we've been working with them to get them to work in groups, small groups.
I wonder if the situation is quite similar for elementary schools, because my students, if they decided to turn off the cameras, even if I encourage them to turn it on, they do not. So I don't know like what's going on their side. So I wonder for elementary school students, if they actually really you know, listen to the teacher, keep the camera on, so we may better support them.
Connecticut, March 10th, 2020.
I'd like to just chime in that especially these are high school students, I think that it might be quite fruitful to have a discussion with them about it, you know, and about the importance of they're functioning as a group. And then there were some of the activities that you mentioned, Alaine, about the humming. Maybe how you start off every class and you take attendance, you could also hum. Maybe you could tell them, you know, when we're humming, we all have to see each other hum, and we're going to hum together.
Or they could say their name and have to make a gesture, and the next person has to match that gesture and make their own gesture, and then it goes around, and there's a connection in the gestures that get made.
That's a good idea.
Vibration there.
So
You can't really decorate your breakout room, can you? No.
and we have a question about the breakout room
Yeah.
from Janet. How can teachers help students establish breakout rooms as safe spaces? And so that's a question there. My 15-year-old mentee says breakout rooms make her feel nervous.
She feels too exposed in a breakout room, Janet? She feels scrutinized?
Yeah, she said when she says something, she doesn't get any response. And so she says she doesn't know if people are judging her. So she just has learned to not say anything and not keep her camera on.
Oh, sweetheart.
So we also have Patricia giving us some feedback about how Team A can give directions using new skills to Team B and C, who can get the destination first. She said, we did this in Spanish and ASL, how to give and get directions.
Oh.
Like solving little mysteries or sending them on like a little hunting for something, finding a location. It's really hard to give and get directions with only words and not pointing. So especially when you're doing it with somebody who's deaf and they're not allowed to use any signs, they can only give you words. So it's a fun and challenging thing, and kids that are high school age really enjoy challenges, and who doesn't like a good mystery? So if they have like a little scavenger hunt, see if you can find this thing on this corner in your town or in their town, and kind of like, where is Carmen San Diego or whatever that game was?
Yes, Carmen San Diego.
So that's just one of the things. I have, my students are online a lot too, and when I take roll, I want to see all of their faces, and I let them know that it's really hard for me because most acupuncturists are introverts. It's really hard for me to be talking to a blank screen.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I just realized I'm talking with my antenna clear up in the sky. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
I feel like it's easier for them and they feel better when they engage and I talk to them. I call their name, and when they say hello to me, I answer in kind. So if some of them say hola, I say hola back. If somebody says howdy, I give them a howdy back. If a cat walks through the room, I stop everything and I say, okay, tell me about your cat.
Makes it relational.
They get super, super excited to share with me. I got to meet Tonia's cat today when we were in the breakout, didn't we, Jan? We got to meet Tonia's kitties, and they're wonderful. And I feel like I made a much better connection with Tonia and Jan because we shared about cats when we were supposed to be meditating. So we didn't totally do what we were supposed to do, but we did make a really great connection, and I won't forget these two lovely ladies. Does that help at all? I feel like these screens can be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody that makes a living reading body language. And so when I only get this much of a body to read, it's challenging. So I just let people know, love comes through the screen. It really does.
Yeah.
And Jane said to
I just wanted to follow up with Janet. Does your student that you were speaking of, do they participate in a group Zoom meeting or just not in the breakouts?
This is for classes. So they try and use breakout rooms a lot. And I just realized, when it's just students, it's hard for those to feel safe for a young teenager, freshman.
Yeah.
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 I don't know, but these ideas people have are really good.
good. I'm glad they're helpful. So go ahead. Someone else?
So Jen said to everyone to require the students to keep their cameras on. And I know we've had to do that because we have people who are not coming on screen, and you want to have that contact as well to see some of the responses, you know, the facial expression. That we feel is important for us to use as nurses. We feel those are important. So we definitely want to see how people are, you know, what expressions they have going on there. So yeah, we ask them to be on camera. We don't say, oh, we're telling you have to be on camera, but we say, please, we would like you to be on camera. And I'll say, you know, I want to see your beautiful faces, and, you know, just use different expressions to encourage them to stay on camera with me, because I know some people are camera shy. So, you know.
Would it work, Jan, for you to give points to students who stay on camera?
Yeah.
Part of their grade is to be on camera?
Yeah, I also told them every time if you respond to the questions in the chat, it will also count for participation.
Yeah.
Yes, Jen just made the comment, build that into evaluation. And I believe she's referring to having the camera on. So she just made that comment. And Jasmine wants us to know, she's saying, I wonder in the breakout room sessions if they can nominate a leader for each session to then recap. So that's a suggestion from Jasmine as well.
It also creates relationship within the breakout room.
Yeah.
So another fun thing, and I know that my students are, you know, master's level and doctorate level students, but we're all children inside. And on Halloween, I told my students we could all dress in costumes. So we did wear costumes. I got to show them that I had fangs on. They thought that was hilarious. I do talk to them in accents to keep them engaged. So thank you to my fellow who said I talk to my students with accents to keep them engaged. The one thing I was going to say is when they go into a breakout, it's like, I need you to come back in with a different hat or a scarf on or a tie, because we all want to laugh together. So bring a goofy factor. Kids like to be silly, and we like to laugh. And if we can laugh, we're actually in that state where we can learn better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So our next question is coming from Hoda Samater. She is a clinician from Ontario, Canada. Hoda is the owner of Begin to Heal Counseling and Consulting Services located in Toronto, and a doctoral student at the University of Toronto in the social justice education stream. So please, Hoda.
You have to unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you see me as well? Because I can't see myself.
Okay, we can see you.
Okay. I'm actually currently now in Edmonton, and I'm in the school system providing clinical support to racialized students. Most of my students are dealing with issues of intergenerational trauma. And we use a different type of approach to provide clinical support, using African Indigenous ways of healing incorporated with mainstream clinical practice. So it's been working. These kids have been incarcerated several times. So meaning that their age ranges from 14 to 17 years of age. And some of them have been charged over 34 times for minor offenses. And so my question is twofold. The first part of my question is how.
So can I just stop you for a minute? Because this sounds like this is a cultural problem, because these are students of color, yes?
Yes.
That in Alberta, if it's like the US, they are subjected to police scrutiny in a different way.
Yes.
And they're marginalized in that way, and they're okay.
Yeah. So as
So it's a cultural
clinician-
problem as well as an individual problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our work in Alberta is not only providing that one-on-one counseling, because when you hear clinician, you think, okay, behind a desk or behind, a chair, and then just having this conversation with the child and providing them with, but that's not how it works.
No.
So you're going into the child's home, you're going into the school system, you're meeting them in their court hearings. Like there's so much involved in providing clinical support beyond just the one-on-one counseling piece.
Yes.
And so my thing is that it is sometimes confused by administration, like people that work in the school system, with violent behavior, like trauma, symptoms of trauma is confused with violent behavior. So they're dismissed, they're expelled, or they're suspended for that reactive.
And you're compounding their problem, their sense of belong, they're challenged with feeling like they belong and they're a worthwhile member of society every time you get expelled because you were so angry you couldn't tolerate being treated this way again.
Yeah. So I really liked your presentation on incorporating many aspects and looking at things from a different perspective rather than just from one dimension. But I want to understand whether or not is it possible for kids to self-regulate during that period where they're being attacked, and for that 1 minute or that 2 seconds of like shifting their thinking, is there a way that I can teach them a different approach?
I love this question. I love this impulse. I'll tell you, get this book.
Okay.
It has a lot of exercises that are all about cultivating that breadth of time between impulse and response.
Okay.
And also being able to cultivate the distinction. This is such a critical distinction. I'm unsafe and I'm uncomfortable. If we can know when we're uncomfortable and not name it as unsafe, then we're not going to take actions as if we're going to die in a minute.
Okay.
That is probably particularly important for your administrators and for the police officers in your community to distinguish I'm uncomfortable instead of I'm unsafe. I need to lock this kid up,
Yeah.
So
do I offer that book to the school like that? So because they're open actually.
Are they?
To,
I think this is a very good one.
Okay.
It's a very good one. He looks at interesting. He looks at distinguishing the impact of trauma on Black bodies, white bodies, and police bodies. He looks at all those three groups and explores how we can achieve all those groups can achieve a body-based understanding of ourselves that informs our choices instead of being in a reactive choice.
Got it.
I had a patient when I was at the VA. Now, granted, I was using acupuncture, not therapy, but I'm sure there are ways that you can do this. He went to New York to visit his daughter, and the train got full, and crowds were overwhelming to him. His habit or his custom was to wake up in the morning with bloody fists. He'd go into a blackout and fight. But this time, because he had enough of this self-awareness to put a breath of space between his arousal and his response, the doors opened and he got off the train. He didn't get into a fight.
Yeah.
The next train came along, it wasn't so full. He got on and he went to go visit his daughter. So there is a way to develop that body awareness. It's in the body. I can feel my breath getting tight. I can feel my shoulders going up. This is when I need to hum, or this is when I need to take a breath, or this is when I need to bring my attention to my feet. And, this is when I need to shift my awareness. This is when I need to imagine that my grandmother is with me because I know she's safe. All kinds of things that can help them regulate, and God bless them that they have to work so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
I want
glad
to
you're
leave.
there.
I want to leave on a good note because it's kind of depressing listening to these kind of stories, but all my kids are actually at a good place right now. All of my clients. So they're all in school, performing very well. They're all working. They have good relationships with their teachers as well as their family. So yeah, so I want to tell you that there is like a positive outcome to all of this, but it's that 2 second or 1 minute, period where they get in trouble. Right. So.
And one of the resiliency factors is supporting impulse control.
Yes.
Which I don't think impulse control means putting a lid on it. I think it means more body awareness and capacity to shift my shift my inner state.
Yeah.
Can I cultivate a capacity to shift my inner state so that this impulse doesn't take me over, and instead I have self-power?
Yes.
So glad you're there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Hoda. Thank you so much. So our next question will come from Dr. Midge Delavan, who has served as a training director for the Utah State Child Welfare Agency's institution of a family-centered program. She has worked on a sexual assault crisis line for 12 years and studied trauma and resilience. She produces a research dissemination newsletter for Resilient Communities, Utah. So please, Dr. Delavan.
Hi, thank you, Alaine, for that wonderful talk. I especially loved how you devoted time to the ventral vagus nerve and explained that so well.
Thank you.
And also I appreciated your inclusion of intergenerational trauma issues. I think that probably has more impact on us than we know. And I appreciate your sensitivity to all those nuanced issues. The questions that people contributed when they signed up were just wonderful questions, and they could, I thought, have served as a whole semester on trauma, and you would be a wonderful teacher for that. So think about
I felt
it.
that too.
But I have two questions for you that are kind of related. If you don't mind, I'll just speak them both out, and then if you want me to repeat anything.
Yep.
Thinking of the experiences of children, adults, and elders, and the people who work with them, I'm wondering how you might help teachers, students, and people working in different areas to understand and respond to the trauma that is shared personally, culturally, and historically. And then how to support teachers and students in their spiritual and emotional needs, meeting their spiritual and emotional needs and their practice in a way that is responsive to the gifts of their cultural and religious perspectives.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the questions that I commonly ask my patients, and you could ask your clients, if you could bring someone here to be with you who respected you, encouraged you, you felt safe with, you knew they loved you or they cared for you, who would that be? And that could be a two-legged, could be a four-legged, or it could be a spirit being. Some people will find a sense of safety with the presence of God that they don't find with human beings. So if they can find a sense of regulation anywhere that they can find it, it's a good thing. And I'm not sure if I'm just going to kind of meander around for a little bit. I'm not sure if your first question was about cross-cultural sense of connection and safety, or cross generational, or maybe both?
Both, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if there are ways that people can discover that their interests and concerns are the same as somebody else's, like we all want a safe neighborhood for our children to grow up in. We all want quality education. We all want quality health care. We all want to feel, cared for by our government. We all want, all these things. And that can help with a conscious statement about race, that if we can find the ways that the things that we want together, then maybe we can, because it's a cultural question. It's about creating a new culture that's an inclusive culture that recognizes our common passions, needs, capacities, and that we've all got different, nuances of need in those things based on who we are. But if we can find common ways that common needs and also common capacities and common ways to support and like try and have some dialogue around those kinds of things with a conscious statement about race that's inherent in it. And I think it's also important for, and Resmaa Menahan talks about this in his book, for white people to deal with white supremacy, and for people of color to gather within their own racial group to explore strategies for their own for cultivating their own resilience, and to not prematurely put people together, because then you can end up creating through misunderstanding and lack of understanding, challenging situations, particularly for people of color, for minority communities, because of the dominance of white supremacist kind of thinking. So it sort of depends on the context that you're engaging in dialogue in.
So we have a comment in the box from Jasmine, who I believe she's at NYU. I don't quite remember, but I do know Jasmine. Jasmine, thank you for being here as well. She said, our hospital just created a diversity and inclusion steering committee for nursing discipline as a start. So that's where they decided to start with the committee. And also Stacy McFarland noted power of the pause, a space and opportunity for choice.
Right. I think some of the dynamics of the proliferation of diversity and inclusion committees is just to keep watching for what's the power, what's the capacity to influence policy and so forth, rather than simply talk, and to go beyond cognitive understandings of race and culture and into cultivating embodied experiences of safety and exploring ways that we all have restrictions in our capacity to trust and be in relationship, and really support deeper transformation that's in the body, that's in the tissues. But I'm glad your hospital has created that. It's an important start. It just needs to not be both the beginning and the end of a deliberate exploration of the impact of white supremacy for a hospital in terms of medical care. Are Black people given pain relievers in the same way that white people are? Not nationally. I don't know about your hospital, but is there an assumption that are there assumptions based on race that are being made that are unfair, not true?
And that's a really good point, because we are part of a sickle cell committee, patient advocacy committee. And that's something, Margaret is also a member. And that's something that we talk about how these patients are perceived in terms of their pain, and is the pain real?
Right. are they just drug seeking
Or
addicts?
are they just drug seeking? That's exactly the terminology. Exactly.
When they
So,
have terrible pain and yeah. And particularly with sickle cell, it's such a racially charged diagnosis that, yeah.
I'd like to also point out that, I mean, although white supremacy is, you know, the one that's really hovering over us, but there are other, you know, contexts where you have supremacy amongst racial groups. You know, it's, you know, like you have the blonde versus the brunette, light skin versus dark skin, Jamaican versus Haitian. Shannon and I are best friends, by the way. No, but you know, all of these things, you know,
Right.
it's not just white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're dealing with all sorts of pecking orders. Although the white supremacy is supreme because it's so much created all the colonial structures dealing with.
Right.
But
and also patriarchy is pretty closely, as Janet Lichty relates, very closely related to white supremacy. There's a book called Deep Diversity that I'm going to put in here. How do I get to everyone? There we go. It's written by a Canadian man who's of Indian descent, I believe Middle Eastern descent, and his movement through thinking of himself as white and then realizing that his own prejudices, and it's a very good read on exploring differences between people and how we can heal and transcend those, and the critical importance of that. I think Jasmine has her hand up.
yes, Jasmine, go ahead. Jasmine, did you want to say something to us, Jasmine? Maybe that was from before.
Maybe.
Okay, so we want to, we're at the end of our session, and we want to thank everyone for being here and participating in this very engaging discussion. We definitely want to thank Alaine just for coming in and giving us all of this information and having us talk through a lot of the stressors and issues that we know we face in the classroom, in the community, and just in other settings as well. And we would like to have your thoughts about this webinar. And so we're going to ask you to complete at the end a very short questionnaire about the webinar, and also to give us any kind of recommendations or suggestions. And so we really want to thank everyone. It's 2:01. We want to thank you for being here. We really appreciate that you took the time out of your Saturday to spend it with us. And we hope to see you again. And again,
I put my email and my website in the chat box, and I'd love to continue to hear your stories and your experiences. Yes. I just so appreciate each and every one of you for being out there and engaging in this critical time in our world's history with students. Thank you.
And everyone's saying thank you. And someone asked about, I'd like to share the Guang video by Gail Wang. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And you're quite welcome, everyone that's saying thank you. And we were just happy to have you. And we do have some things in the chat box that we will share with people that attended the seminar, the webinar, sorry. So thank you all, and take care, and please be safe. Please do be safe out there. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye now. Okay. So Alaine, we have the content from the chat box for anyone with questions or and
Great.
Margaret will send all of that to you.
Great. Great.
And we
great.
want to just thank the others for coming in and asking the questions. So many people had lots of questions in the chat box, lots of comments. So very engaging.
Yeah, and sorry, I when I'm in the shared screen, I can't see I don't see the
No,
chat.
that's okay. That's quite
so
all right.
I appreciate you jumping in and telling me to tighten up here a little bit.
That's okay. That's quite all
I
right.
looked at my watch before we got started.
We did really well on time. No, we did really
pretty
well on time.
We started a few minutes late, and
yeah, we started a few minutes late, and so that's why I just waited for a little while before, but the time frame was actually very good.
Yeah, no, I think it was really,
it was really good.
I really enjoyed myself.
Yes. I think we had a really nice audience. We got a good turnout. We actually had a lot of people register, but I do believe part of what's happening this weekend is the surge and people kind of trying to probably, take care of business before, God forbid, we have to have a lockdown or a partial lockdown. I'm pretty sure that kind of influenced people in terms of, do I do this or that? How should I, be running around out there getting things done or, so.
I had this, I emailed a friend of mine who's a teacher with a question just to ponder with me about doing this webinar. And she wrote back and she said, I'm just so exhausted, I can't even speak.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are just so tired.
The work that teachers are doing in the classrooms for our whole country, they're doing it.
Yeah. So we still have Hoda. Oh, I think we were okay. So people are leaving. All right.
I was going to call Yan back in because I
think Yan has a meeting.
Oh, she has another meeting?
She has another meeting. She did mention another meeting.
She did a great job.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
And what a challenge.
In contrast to the last time, I thought that thanks to your good work, Margaret, and in really pushing for us to have all of those questions, that type of engagement was
definitely
It
wonderful.
was really nice dialogue.
Very good. Excellent.
The quality of participation
very
high
was
very high,
really great.
Very high.
Yes.
Very high.
The quality of the
The
participation.
quality, exactly, the quality.
And I'm so happy Hoda was able to make it. We threw Hoda out of the session last time because of the hackers.
Oh no! Oh, so glad to have her.
Oh, we're so happy to have her.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she brought such important stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she came back.
Alaine, it's really always a pleasure having you, I have to say.
I had a good time.
Very. I'm glad we did a part 2. That was a really good suggestion on the part of Margaret and Shelley to have a part 2. And you, of course, Alaine, agreeing. I think that was really great.
There's going to be, I did turn off the recording and turn it back on again during the breakout, but I didn't do it promptly. So there's going to be a little bit to the tape that you're
they did a good job with the last video, so I'm pretty sure it'll work out fine.
Speaking of trauma, I think that one of the reasons that we might not have gotten as many participants this time is that the link went out very late. And that's my own trauma about getting hacked last time.
Yeah, I had 2 people who came later, but they kept asking about the link, and about 2 others who said, but there's no link, but I sent it to them through email and by phone, and 2 of the 4 came in, which was good. So.
It was plenty of people. We had about almost 25.
We had almost, I'd say yes. We had almost
it went
25.
deep,
it was really good.
It was
really good session.
I was so pleased at the way everyone spoke from their own particular context. And the way everything fit in together.
Yes.
Across specializations, across ages, that was very rich.
Yeah.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
A
very.
lot of like-minded people
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Really
are
concerned
doing very
people.
similar
Mhm.
for work.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
to show, it just shows
Yeah.
how much we are more alike than
Then we are
different,
different. Yeah.
and how we should really use that as the starting point
Mhm.
for a lot of the issues
Mhm.
that we're faced with.
Yep.
And just to start talking, like you said, Alaine,
Mhm.
start having conversations.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 Well, I just there's a new podcast that I did that just came out yesterday
Uh-huh.
about the elections and trauma.
Ah,
I need that one.
I'll
Yeah.
send it. I'll
Please
send it to
do.
all of you.
yes, please,
And
please,
I'll put it on my Facebook page, and
please,
it'll be in my
please,
It'll be in my newsletter next month.
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary. And
please,
Mhm.
please.
I'm more and more, I keep remembering the Holocaust
Yes,
course I
yes,
took in
yes,
college.
Margaret, definitely, I agree.
How our America right now is very much
Much behaving like that.
Germany of the 1930s,
I know.
and there are just so many parallels. It's really scary.
It's
You want to hear the
scary.
one that like put me on my seat? The
Yeah.
Germans studied the American South in the 1930s to
Oh.
make their plans for exterminating Jews.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yes, they studied America to learn how to do fascism.
Mm.
Whoa. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it hops around.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like revolution.
Mhm.
Yes.
To be a revolution, you have to impact on the revolution someplace else.
I'm
And-
sorry, Margaret. I think, are we sending out that survey later? Someone just texted me. It'll go out later. Yeah, someone actually texted me. Where's the survey? Yeah.
Love that.
I had no time to prepare my son last minute. I'm talking about 10 p.m. Tells me that he needs me to take care of his clothes for taking pictures, graduation pictures. And that included the robe and just everything. And we had to look for things. So I was up until 1 taking care of that. Then I had to take care of the webinar stuff.
Mhm.
And then this morning having to get him to try things on. Then he went to the school, forgot his hat. It was a mess. And then he was putting pressure on me to travel there.
Oh.
Then I felt that I was not there.
Oh.
Oh well. Oh well. Oh
So I
well.
didn't really have time.
We
Okay.
can send it out within 24 hours. People do that all the time.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, people do that all the
Yeah.
time. They send it out. And Hoda said, thank you for answering my question and your inspirational stories.
Nice.
Wrote in.
Lovely. She's lovely. Okay, well, I'm gonna sign off, and with gratitude
Yes.
for each of you and this wonderful opportunity that I've been able to experience with you all.
Thank
and,
you, Elaine. We have to do
you're,
this again,
you're part
right,
of my
Margaret,
life now.
Shelley?
You're part of my life now. So
Yes, we have
you
to
know,
do this again.
yeah,
Definitely,
so-
Shelley,
so
Margaret.
don't stray too far.
On getting a panel about bullying.
Oh,
That's the next thing.
I think we should plan on going out to eat when the
Yeah.
when the
Yes,
quarantine
we
is lifted.
should.
I think we
Yes,
should all
we
go to New
should.
York. I think we
Yes,
should go to
you
New
guys should
York
come to New York.
and have a good time.
Yeah, that's
You come
right.
down here.
Okay,
Or
where
we
are
can
you?
come
I'm
down here.
sorry, where are you,
have an
Shelley?
open- the two of you have an open invitation to come down and visit me and Lainey.
That's
in
right.
our area.
Wow, okay, so
Yeah.
we'll come.
Yeah, we
Where
can-
are you? I'm sorry, where are you,
So
Shelley?
in Northern Virginia,
Okay, oh yeah.
so
Oh,
right
yeah,
outside,
that's-
we're the Washington DC
Oh
metropolitan.
yeah,
area,
yeah,
so-
that's an easy ride for us. Yeah, that's
Yes.
not bad at all. Margaret and I will come down.
There you go. There you
We'll
go.
come down. Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Come down for a demonstration and piggy
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
or lobbying.
yes, or lobbying, exactly. Yes.
But if you've never gone to Juniors with Shelley in Brooklyn,
Oh,
You've
Yes,
missed
Brooklyn.
an opportunity.
I
You're
didn't remember that I
kidding.
went with you to Brooklyn to juniors.
Oh man, we went and got pickles. Remember we stole
Really?
pickles
Okay.
off of all the other
I used to live on Flatbush.
Okay. Wow. All right. So you know the neighborhood. You really know the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, juniors, they're still, sitting
there?
right in the same spot. I think they'll survive. Many of the other businesses that moved out, the rent, as you know, the whole regentrification took over all of downtown Brooklyn.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, stay in touch, friends.
All right.
Yes,
My life.
definitely. Bye. Love you
Take care.
all. Be safe. Please be safe, everyone. Please.
Yeah. Back at you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.